Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving deep into a high-tech agricultural revolution. We're going to pull back the curtain on how scientists are creating a living, breathing, billion-dollar blueprint for the perfect plant. All right, before we jump in, just a quick heads up, this content does not constitute medical advice, legal advice, or recommendations for the use, self-treatment, or consumption of any substance. So how do you perfectly copy one plant a million times? I mean, really think about that. You've got this one perfect plant, and your job is to make millions of them. Every single one an identical twin. You see, in the modern cannabis industry, consistency is everything, and just planting seeds won't cut it. So what's the secret? Well, the solution to this huge challenge is, kind of funny enough, both super simple and incredibly complex. And it all comes down to one single plant. They call this the mother plant, and you can really think of it like a living genetic bank account. It's kept in a state of endless youth, never allowed to get old or flower. It's the one and only source for every single cutting or clone. And get this, the health of this one plant can make or break an entire multi-million-dollar crop. So yeah, taking care of it is a very high-stakes science. So that really brings us to the billion-dollar question, right? How in the world do you trick a plant that's basically hardwired to die after just one season into staying young and productive for years and years? The secret? It's all about manipulating the plant's sense of time. It's a fascinating process called photoperiodism. Basically, the plant has this internal clock, and that clock is programmed to say, hey, the nights are getting longer, it's time to make flowers. What cultivators do is they essentially hijack that clock with very specific lighting. They hit the pause button on its life cycle, keeping it stuck in a state of constant leafy growth. And what's pretty interesting here is that there's a real debate in the industry about the best way to do this. You've got one camp that swears by an 18-hour day with a 6-hour night. They say the plant needs that dark period to rest and do important things like growing roots. Then you've got the other camp that just blasts them with 24 hours of nonstop light. They're thinking more light means more growth, and you totally eliminate any chance of the plant accidentally thinking it's time to flower. But just keeping the plant young isn't enough. You also have to sculpt it. See, if you just let a plant do its own thing, it has this tendency called apical dominance. It basically just wants to grow straight up, focusing all its energy on one main stem, kind of like a skinny little tower. And that's all thanks to hormones called auxins that stop the side branches from growing. Now, if you're trying to get a ton of cuttings, it's just not very efficient. So what do growers do? They break that dominance, and it's shockingly simple. They just snip off the very top of that main shoot. It's a process called topping. The second they do that, the flow of that hormone that was holding everything back just stops. And suddenly, all those little side shoots that were just waiting around get the green light to grow. The plant goes from being a single spear to this wide, bushy powerhouse with tons of tips. And every single one of those tips is a potential new clone. Okay, but it gets even more detailed. It's not just about the shape of the plant. The secret to a perfect clone actually starts before a single cut is ever made. It's all about engineering the mother plant's environment to create the absolute perfect starting material. And this is where modern LED lights have been a total game changer. I mean, growers can literally dial in a specific light recipe using different colors. For example, they'll use a lot of blue light. Blue light basically tells the plant, hey, grow short and stocky with thick, strong stems, which is exactly what you want for a clone. On the flip side, far red light tells the plant it's in the shade, so it starts to stretch out and get all weak and spindly. That's the last thing you want. And it's not just the light they control. These growers also meticulously manage the air itself. They focus on something called vapor pressure deficit, or VPD. Now that sounds complicated, but the easiest way to think about it is just as the thirstiness of the air. By getting that thirst level just right, they create this constant, gentle pull that draws water and nutrients up through the plant's veins. This is super important for delivering things like calcium, which is basically the cement that builds strong cell walls for all those new shoots. By the way, if you're finding this deep dive into plant science as cool as I do, could you do me a quick favor and hit that like and subscribe button? It really truly helps our channel out a lot and lets us make more explainers just like this one. All right, so the mother plant is prepped, she's perfectly shaped, and she's full of nutrients. Now it's time for the really delicate, almost surgical part, actually creating the new plant. And you have to understand, in this world, the most dangerous weapon isn't some bug or pest, it's a dirty pair of scissors. Seriously, a single contaminated pruning shear can spread a virus that could absolutely devastate an entire crop. So sanitation here isn't just a good idea, it is the #1 most important rule. The actual process is incredibly precise. First, you select a perfect healthy tip. Then you make a clean 45-degree cut, which maximizes the surface area so it can drink up water. Step 3, you dip that fresh cut into a rooting hormone gel. This does 2 things. It tells the plant to start growing roots, and it seals the wound so no pesky air bubbles get in. And finally, you stick that cutting into a rooting medium, pop it under a high humidity dome, and that keeps it from drying out while it works on growing a whole new root system. But even with all of this incredible precision, a new enemy has appeared. It's an invisible threat, and it has forced the entire industry to evolve, to take a massive leap into a whole new era of high-tech biology. It's called Hop Latent Viroid, or HLVd. Some people have even called it the COVID of cannabis. It's this tiny, infectious loop of RNA, and the scary part is it's totally invisible. It doesn't even show symptoms in the mother plant, but when those clones grow up and start to flower, they just dud out. Their growth is stunted, and they suffer a catastrophic 50 to 70% loss in potency and yield. This one tiny thing has changed the entire game. The industry's response, though, has been nothing short of breathtaking. It's a leap straight into science fiction. Instead of just taking cuttings, the top facilities are now using tissue culture. They're growing perfect, clean plants from just a few sterile cells in a lab, which basically resets the plant's biological clock back to generation 0. They're using these automated bioreactors to multiply these tiny plants on an industrial scale. And for the ultimate genetic insurance policy, cryopreservation. They're literally freezing the plant's genetic material in liquid nitrogen for perfectly safe long-term storage. It is absolutely wild. And this really puts the scale of that shift into perspective. A really skilled person can stick maybe 800 clones an hour. That's fast. But a robot, it can do over 2,500 in that same hour. And every single one is perfect, and it never, ever gets tired. And all of this really leads to a pretty big question, doesn't it? As we keep pushing for more consistency, more security, and more efficiency, is the future of farming for these kinds of high-value crops no longer in a greenhouse or a field, but inside a sterile laboratory? Hit that like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching.